Welcome to Hannity. Tonight, President Obama continues to face heavy criticism for his appalling response to the vicious terrorist attacks in Paris. Now, here's what he said yesterday.
We have always understood that this would be a long-term campaign. There will be setbacks and there will be successes. The terrible events in Paris were obviously a terrible and sickening setback. Even as we grieve with our French friends, however, we can't lose sight that there has been progress being made. ISIL does not represent Islam to the degree that anyone would equate the terrible actions that took place in Paris with the views of Islam. Those kinds of stereotypes are counterproductive. They're wrong. Well, Jim, I just spent the last three questions answering that very question. So I don't know what more you want me to add. All right, so this is another variation on the same question. And I guess let me try it one last time.
Here now with reaction, author of Crippled America, How to Make America Great Again, 2016 Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. You know, Mr. Trump, my question is really simple. This is a president that said hours before this attack in Paris that ISIS was contained. He referred to them as the JV team. He's talked about, or administration officials have talked about, overseas contingency operations and workplace violence. And meanwhile, this keeps happening again and again, and he can't say radical Islam. And now he's going to take in 10,000 Syrian refugees, even though our intelligence officials warn us that ISIS will infiltrate that population. How do you process this?
I mean, personally, I don't think he was meant for this job. You want to know the truth. The temperament is wrong. I watched that disastrous news conference yesterday. It was insulting. He wasn't angry at the killers, the murderers, the animals that did this horrible thing. He was angry at reporters, and I think some of the Republicans, frankly. Yeah. But he was angry at the reporters, and I just don't think it's not for him. And unfortunately, we will have to suffer with it. But this job is not for him. That was a terrible performance yesterday and an embarrassment to the country.
The National Intelligence, the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, said ISIS, it's likely they will infiltrate the refugee population. The State Department spokesman John Kirby has said as much. The Assistant FBI Director, the FBI Director James Comey, Michael Steinbach, Mike McCall said, the House Homeland Security Chairman. And here's more people warning that ISIS will infiltrate the Syrian population. Here's what they said.
The concern is in Syria, the lack of our footprint on the ground in Syria, that the databases won't have the information we need. So it's not that we have a lack of process, it's there's a lack of information.
And that obviously raises grave concern as to being able to do proper background checks of the individuals coming into the country.
Yes.
I don't obviously put it past the likes of ISIL to infiltrate operatives among these refugees.
We can only query against that which we have collected. And so if someone has never made a ripple in the pond in Syria in a way that would get their identity or their interests reflected in our database, we can query our database till the cows come home, but we're not going to, there'll be nothing show up because we have no record on that person.
There is some fear that some of these refugees may actually be posing as refugees, but they might actually be Al-Qaeda or ISIS terrorists trying to sneak into Europe or the United States. What do you make of that?
Well, certainly that's a possibility. I mean, you can't dismiss that out of hand.
Mr. Trump, if the president keeps insisting, as he does, to take in these Syrian refugees, is he not gambling with the lives of Americans? If Americans die, if what happens in Paris happens here, does he not end up having blood on his hands for not listening to his own intelligence officials?
Totally. It's a total disaster. The people are going to come in. I talked to you about this 2 weeks ago where we talked about the migration, how so many of the people in the migration were strong young men. You look at them. I'm saying, where are the women? Where are the children? We're taking in people. We have no idea who they are. They have no identification. They have no papers. They're creating papers. They're making up papers. And as you say, he doesn't even mention the word. He doesn't want to talk about radical Islamic terrorism. He refuses to say the words. And here's a man refuses to say those three words. And by the way, Hillary Clinton refuses to say the word. She's as bad as he is. But although I'm not so sure about that. Can anybody be worse than what we have right now? So you have people coming in, and I heard as of this morning, they're already missing 1 or 2 people. They came in and they're gone. They're missing. So I think it's a way that, you know, it could very well be the ultimate Trojan horse. We're going to have to see. Hopefully not. But thousands are coming in, and you mentioned 10,000. During the debate the other night, the Democratic debate, they talked about 65,000. I've heard they want to take in 250,000.
Yeah, but not all from Syria.
Crazy.
The 255,000 numbers over 3 years. They're not all necessarily from Syria, but we don't know where they're coming from. And
we have no idea where they're coming from.
Dianne Feinstein, I'm hardly her biggest supporter, but she chastised the president by saying, ISIS isn't contained. I read the intelligence faithfully. ISIL is expanding. She's saying that. How does our president get that wrong? By saying that hours before the attack. How is that possible?
Well, not only that, if you look at Gitmo, 5 people released that same day, and they're back on in a private plane. They go back, and they're going to end up fighting very soon. They'll be fighting against us. He released them the same day. You would think that maybe, I mean, just maybe he could have waited or done it some other time. They shouldn't be released to start off with. But you look at what's happening, the way our country is being run in so many different ways. But this is now the hot topic. This is security. This is the ultimate problem because we need borders. Now all of a sudden everyone's saying, you know, Mr. Trump, I didn't agree with the wall. Now all of a sudden everyone's agreeing with the wall, the real wall, not the toy wall that they built, the real wall. And plenty of people are going to come through the southern border. You know that, and so do I. And they're going to be coming from the Middle East. They're going to be coming from places where it's not going to be a good situation. But people already, Sean, are missing.
You know, if you that's true. They have the one person you're talking about in New Orleans in that specific case. You know, I look at your poll numbers, and in this week and last week, you had 2 of your biggest numbers, one in over 40%, 38%. And I wonder if this message is resonating. Daniel Horowitz of Conservative Review, I'll put it up on the side so our viewers can watch this, talks about the increase since 9/11 in the numbers of people we are taking in from Muslim countries. I would agree with the president. We're not at war with Islam. But the problem is there a clash of cultures if you grow up in a country under Sharia law where women can't drive and must cover themselves and women can't go out in public without a male relative or 4 male eyewitnesses are needed for rape? Is there a conflict of cultures that makes it very difficult?
There certainly seems to be.
Yeah, well, explain.
There certainly seems to be.
And how should we factor that in when we're accepting in, and again, I'll put those statistics up while you're talking, how should we factor that in when we're taking in people from these countries? How do you ascertain whether they buy into the culture they came from or want to assimilate here?
Well, look at what's happening in Germany. I mean, Merkel's taken in all of these people. They're having riots in the street. They're having tremendous crime. She's made a terrible mistake. She's gone from being a very good and respected leader where the German people are beside themselves. They don't know what's happening. I mean, look at what she's done. Look at what so many have done. And then others, you know, you talk about the Gulf states. They're making a fortune. They won't take anybody. And I'm not sure, but I don't think they're putting up very much money either. But you look at what's happening in terms of this migration and in terms of what's coming. We have no idea. Will they assimilate? Are they going to be able to assimilate? I don't know that they even want to assimilate. And yet we take everybody. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what their crime record is. It could be wonderful and it could be a disaster. But I have a feeling that a lot of bad things are going to happen out of this. And if you remember a long time ago when this first started, I said, look, I have a big heart. I have as big a heart as anybody. And we should do maybe a safe zone or something over in Syria and get everybody else involved and have a big safe zone. But I tell you, if they come into this country, they're going out. If I win, they're going out. We can't take a chance. You know, if you take thousands of people, and again, I hear it's going to be many, many more than what you're talking about right now. But if you take thousands of people, Sean, all you need is a couple. You know, you don't need 25. You don't need 100. Look at the damage done in Paris with just a few people.
That's a great point. Is it worth the risk? If one American dies, is it worth the risk? And my answer is no. That we cannot afford to gamble with people's lives. Here's my next question. The Republicans in Congress, both the House and the Senate, you know, they have enumerated powers. They have the power of the purse. Would you urge them to use that power and defund the president's efforts to take in these Syrian refugees?
I certainly would. You know, it's sort of interesting. I was talking about it before. I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative. Nothing's happened since we took the Senate. So now we have the House, we have the Senate. Nothing's happened. It's the same exact story. In fact, in a certain way, with all of his executive orders, I think Obama's almost doing better. So we take the Senate, all of a sudden we have majorities. Nothing's happened. I'm almost more disappointed. Maybe I'll take the word almost out. I am more disappointed in the Republicans than the Democrats, because at least the Democrats, we know where they're coming from, Sean. The Republicans have done nothing. Look at the budget that was just passed. They've done nothing.
I have said this many times. I'm more disappointed with the Republicans than I am Democrats. A lot of news was made after you suggested that there might be mosques in America that need to be shut down. Can you go into more detail?
Well, you're going to have to do something. They're coming out of some bad things are happening, and a lot of them are happening in the mosque, and you're going to have to do something. And I'm not the only one saying this. Other countries are saying this, frankly. But some really bad things are happening.
In other words, if there are terroristic threats, if we see that there's plotting and planning and talk of jihad and terroristic threats that we think might be talked about in these places, if we can prove that, in that case, you would shut them down.
Nobody wants to say this, and nobody wants to shut down religious institutions or anything, but, you know, you understand it. A lot of people understand it. We're going to have no choice. There's absolutely no choice. Some really bad things are happening, and they're happening fast. I think they're happening a lot faster than anybody understands, too. Certainly a lot faster than our president understands, because he doesn't understand anything. He doesn't get it. Refuses to even call it by its correct name.